Fanthorpe, and it is Friday, so we have a small business owner here with us today. So we're going to be talking to Brittin Builders today, and Emily is here from that organization. Now we'll get a little bit more background on this kind of in the house construction sector business and find out all the tips and tricks they've learned along the way. So I'm looking forward to hearing their story and what digital tools they use. As a reminder for our Digital Boost users, our Digital Boost community page on Fridays, you're able to put up your special offers. So if you're a member of that page or that group, so to speak, you can actually pop up any special offers you've got running for the weekend on there on Fridays. We would love to see what you have to offer and use our page to push out your brand. Very cool. If you're tuning in with us on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, you can have a chat with us and communicate with us using the comment section or the chat feature or the Q&A feature here on Zoom. We'd love for you to participate in the session and get any questions that you have answered in this from this sector success story. So thanks, Emily, so much for joining us here today.
Hi there. Thanks, Anamari. Thanks for having us onto your platform. So just to tell you a little bit about our company and our journey through the digital minefield. I'll start with a little bit of history about Brittin Builders. Brittin Builders was actually started by Roger Brittin, that's my husband's father, more than 50 years ago now, and with a colleague of his, and who was called Brian Williams, and they set up Williams and Brittin, which later became Brittin Builders. So it's been around for a long time, always based here in Hawke's Bay, with a little bit of movement outside for particular customers. And Jason had been doing his apprenticeship, finished his apprenticeship with his father, went overseas, and we met over there, and then returned to New Zealand at the beginning of 2009 to take over as Roger was retiring. So we've been in business here in Hawke's Bay since 2009 now, so nearly 13 years. So we have a team of builders. We've got 9 builders. We've also got an operations manager and an office manager, myself, who sort of, as part of doing the digital strategy and HR and other things that keep the wheels turning. And then we also, in 2014, bought Park Hill Joinery. We were a big part of Park Hill Joinery's customer base back then. So when the owner decided to sell, we picked that up, and that's been really pivotal, because we can look after not just the builds but also the internal joinery, and we have a painting team as well. So we kind of manage the whole project from end to end. So we began our digital journey in earnest, really probably at the beginning of last year, not long after the first lockdown. And we began with realizing that because of staff shortages in New Zealand, in construction industry, which was that was a really big pusher for us, retaining and getting good staff, because we do really high-end builds, and our attention to detail, I think, makes it different than lots of others. The quality of our staff was really important. So the first thing that we did was to change our website.
Let's get into that a little bit, Emily. Thanks for kind of taking over there for me while I just open up the chats. So I kind of like to get into a little bit more of successes and challenges before we get into your digital tools. So let's move into that area first. So tell us about, obviously you've talked a little bit about staffing, but let's talk about some of the challenges over the course of this whole journey of Brittin Builders. So it's been around for quite a long time. So, what have been some of the challenges that you guys have faced over that time? And then we'll get into the successes, my favorite part.
Well, I think that the challenges are always around having and retaining good staff. Some of our, I would say that's both a challenge and a success. Brent Christensen has been with us for 35 years. He worked for Roger before Jason, and actually it's funny that Jason's his boss now, because he actually was telling Jason what to do when he was an apprentice. So that's quite a cool story. Several of the others have worked for us for in excess of 10 years, and the joinery team have stayed on since we bought it in 2014, so all of them have been with us for more than 8. So we're winning that race, but also as those guys, they bring such a wealth of experience, but they are obviously aging. They, stuff hurts, and maybe they, take a bit longer to get over flu or whatever. And so I think having a team behind them, the younger guys bring new stuff. They are more innovative, they are more excited by challenges, and so they bring new ideas to the team as well. So that's probably one of our big challenges. I think construction has actually been very buoyant across that whole journey until now. And now the last 2 years have been incredibly challenging, but the other major to staff is materials. So that's a big.
I've heard that
challenge.
It's really hard and it's also really hard to quote a job because the material costs keep on really fluctuating as well.
Yeah.
Have you found
that's very, very difficult to quote a job. And I think that we have to be very clear with people that the challenge for quoting a job, for example, we had a job recently where we were trying to quote a dig out. Now, as the legislation and the legal position changes, people who are engineers are, they're worried about having their neck on the line, and councils, so that the need to prove and ensure that things can't tip up is very strong. That means, so for example, in this case, we were digging out, we needed to dig down to where it's hard. Those dig out costs became astronomical because, and yet not Brittin Builders' fault particularly, just you've got to keep digging till it's hard. And the cost of a digger and a digger driver, with the staffing and the fact that you've got to pay people to stay here, is, that's a real challenge for customers, and one that's really difficult to manage. Communication is the key all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you find that, we do have all of these raising fuel prices and stuff like that. I mean, obviously you've got a team of people, you've got a lot of machinery. I'm sure that's also kind of playing
hugely.
parts.
We have an example of that is we have a fuel card that everybody uses with a limit on it. And I've never hit that limit ever. We just, pay it off once a month. And this month, last month, one of the guys rang me from the fuel station and said the card won't work, and I traced it back, and it was actually we'd hit the limit, and there wasn't actually any more vehicles than the previous month. It was just the cost of fuel had hit the limit. It was fine. They increased the limit. It's no problem at all. But it was still like, there's just an example right there of the just increased costs without doing anything over quite a short space of time.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. It is really impacting a lot of Kiwis in a lot of different industries, just because of basic commutes or, just trying to transport their goods, all of that stuff really being impacted by the rising costs just due to getting things in the country. And then also, just bits and pieces. I mean, the food industry is affected. I mean, so, we're all experiencing that. So thanks so much for sharing those challenges, because I know that so many other folks are experiencing that as well. And I think it's always nice to know that you're not alone out there, and we're all working, towards, we're all working as hard as we can and making the best choices that we can based on the situation. But let's move into the successes. So tell us, 2009 as an establishment kind of point, what have been some of the key successes? It doesn't necessarily have to be pertaining to financial success or anything like that, but as an organization, how have you guys felt you have achieved success?
I think one of our particular successes was that we have been able to establish and almost grow into, but really develop our own identity. And I think for a brand, that's really important. When I was looking to recruit more staff at the beginning of this year, the first thing that I'd done was to rebrand, not change the name, but smarten our branding up. And that was a really interesting journey, because I had to start right at the beginning about, well, who are we and what are we about and what are our value system and what's important to us. And I felt that just getting that to the point where you could go, we are traditional, we are made in Hawke's Bay, live in Hawke's Bay. This is our, to use a Maori phrase, turenga waiwai, this is our place to stand. It's who we are, where we are. These are the people that we build for, are our best friends and our community. And we have no desire to be anything different than that. Let's just do that as well as we can possibly do it. Mm-hmm. Using the tradition that we've got of a big family network here, we also have developed that over time, and our staff have stayed with us. So people will actually ask for particular staff members to work on their project. It's quite difficult. That's a challenge these days, where I'm just trying to make sure that I've got enough. But we did manage to recruit 3 new builders this year. And I believe that that's because we managed to speak to our brand well, and then convert that into a digital space in a way that was cohesive and clear, expressed who we were clearly, so that people knew when they applied what they were coming to.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I think that that's something businesses either miss, they can often struggle with. Personal branding, or that branding of an organization, is so important, because it's your voice out there in the world. It tells people who you are and what you're all about. And we've done quite a few sessions on branding techniques and stuff like that. And we've actually got a session coming up in probably 2 weeks with Contrastica, and they're going to be talking about branding, and it should be a really good session for our users. If you're sitting out there and you haven't sorted out your branding, do check out some of our sessions. You can always type in this search engine, just type in branding, and it'll pull up a whole bunch of video references on the website. If you're cheeky and you only tune in our social media channels, you'll need to go and register to Digital Boost so that you can get access to those archived videos. There's even bite-sized content that you can watch if you don't want to watch a longer session. There's 3 to 5 minute videos, so do check it out. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the development of your branding. So especially in the digital space, can you talk us through a little bit of how you went about that?
Yeah, so the first thing that I did was I worked with actually a designer that we've worked with before. She's basically a graphic designer, but she had actually done our original branding 12 years ago, so she kind of knew us. And but when I talked to her about what I was trying to create, these were the words that I'd used. I'd said, we're traditional, because a lot of the builds that we do are not like sparkly modern. They're like the big traditional old villas. That's what we're kind of known for, especially because of the joinery shop, which does timber joinery, and that means windows and French doors and things like that. That even the big old English sash windows, we can reproduce those. So that's something that we're known for. So traditional was a word, but also we decided we were looking for a high-end color, and there's a black was, that's like Black Barn, and lots of other places use black and white. Then there's navy. Well, navy is like Bailey's and Sotheby's and things that sort of speak to a high-end brand. And I was like, yeah, navy, but it's been done a lot. And then that's where I landed with green, because green, which you can see on my top, is that green for us was traditional. It was the green of navy and white, so we've got green and white. But the other thing is that we live in a rural place. This is where a lot of what we build is out on farms and in rural settings. So, and also we live on an orchard. So when the boys come to work in the morning, that's where they tune up. basically next to a paddock. So that felt like it spoke us. So that was where we started. And then when we developed the website, I wanted to make sure that we had some cohesion between our painting and our building and our joinery. Even though they stand alone, they still are connected, and I wanted that feel. So we kept the colors the same, and the branding is, you can sort of see there's 3 shields there, which is the tradition of the shields, and then the cross hammers is actually something we had before. So the crossed hammers became cross paint brushes and then the little joinery skill saw, just to kind of bring the 3 things to keep their own identity, but yet bring them together.
Yeah, so, I love that. Real traditional with the little, crest, I guess, it really ties in with the theme of what you were going with. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was Bex. Bex came up with that. And when we first did that, that's Little Red Robot. She's just a little design studio, just a one person. And she was just awesome. When I saw it, and this sounds ridiculous, but I actually wept. I was like, she's really heard me. That's exactly what I was looking for. So from there, we took it to redoing the website. And we used a platform called Miro for doing that, which was amazing. It's a bit like...
really? You use Miro for your website?
Well, I didn't do it. My brother actually has a web design company in London, and that worked really well working with him, because it meant that when I was asleep, he worked on stuff. And then when I was awake, we would cross over and just decide, to collaborate. And then I'd let him do his thing again. But it meant that I could see it. And so I had a login to Miro, and I worked on it too, and wrote bits of copy and said, can you move this here? And that's not quite right, and all those kinds of things. So it was definitely a collaboration with his team and us. And then
I'll just let everybody know what Miro is, because I think, some folks, we haven't actually done a tutorial on that. So Miro, Miro, is actually a platform that you can use. You can use it for heaps of different things. You can make like a Kanban kind of thing. You can do mind mapping on it. It allows multiple users to be in at the same time, just like most cloud tools. I think you can get up to 3 Miro boards for free, and then beyond that, and possibly some capabilities, you'll need to pay for that version. But I will drop in the chat across all the platforms a link to Miro, so if you're interested in checking that out and just having a play, you can have a look. Hannah Morgan, maybe, I'm not sure if she did. I must have missed that, because we did Trello, but I didn't think we did Miro. But maybe she did do Miro on a time that I wasn't here. Just getting messages in the chat there from Dean. He's like, I think we did a session on that. We might have, Dean. Thank you. You're the expert around here. So that's wonderful. What platform do you use for your website, Emily?
My brother's got that sort of under control, so I leave that with him.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it comes up and it does its thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So you went across and you worked with him collaboratively to build your website, continue. Sorry.
So from there, because my feeling was, if I wanted to attract amazing staff, I needed to look amazing digitally, because that's the first place. If someone thinks, oh, look, a job advert on, say, Trade Me Jobs, which is where I've generally advertised, what's the first thing they're going to do is Google you. So they need to see you in all forms. So from the website, the very next thing that I did was to hook up with this amazing girl called Jodine McIntyre, and her company is called Social Smarty, and she's amazing for small business social media, basically. And she just led me through using some things like Canva for doing Facebook posts and for doing Instagram posts, and helped me to use my voice in that space so that I could express who we are. And so that and I should have said right at the beginning, the first thing that I did, which was middle of last year, was I got a professional photographer to take photos of our team, our factory, our builds, all sorts of stuff. Although you can take the odd one yourself, unless you're really good with your camera, and some people are, but I didn't feel confident enough. I wanted that great lighting and the great, setup. So I'd done that first. I had all this content to go onto my website, which also gave me content for Facebook and Instagram. So that was the next place that I went, set those 2 business pages up, and then began to schedule posts. And so that I use that both for job advertising now and Trade Me jobs for advertising for staff there.
Yeah, and you actually use WordPress. That's your website, just so you know.
Yeah.
I've just had a look. So you can always check out what website people are using. Just a little tip. If you right mouse click on a website and go down and push inspect, it will tell you all about about somebody's website, what tools they use on their website, whether they use Google Analytics, whether they use, what kind of integrations they have. A lot of that stuff is all present there. You can have a look at what their website looks like, if it's mobile optimized, all of that in the inspect. So that's a cute thing, because I think a lot of folks go, man, I really love this business's website. I wonder who they use. I wonder what platform they use. And so right mouse click on inspect, and then have a look. And if it has WPs kind of everywhere, usually that's WordPress. So,
thanks for that, Anamari.
I'm pretty sure it's WordPress. That's great. Now, to organize your social media posts, do you calendar those in? How do you do that?
Yeah, I use Meta Business Suite, and then it has a scheduling function, and I just schedule them up and try to make them, well, sometimes they're just an advert. Sometimes they are, like when our operations manager started, I did a little spiel about him. I just need to, I've had another couple of members of staff working, and they're out on site, and I need to go and get their photos to add to my thing. So that'll be the next thing that I put up.
Do you find that you get what do you find you get the most engagement on with your posts?
Generally, when we talk about people, I think that lots of people take, just from other social media posts that I see from other people in the construction space, that you often see quite a lot of nice builds, and that's great. That's awesome. But I think that often the best engagement that I get, the more comments and likes and stuff. I wrote one which was called The Engine Room, which had a picture of myself and my office manager and Jason, my husband, all just around the table, like actually we were laughing, but and that got the most likes of anything else, because it just was, I don't know, it just spoke to people.
Yeah, I think that people like to know that people drive business. They like to know who you are, especially in this day and age when everything's online. They want to know that people are real. And, people love to see other people happy. It's like, it's a real thing.
And I felt that I had to write, we do actually take this seriously, because they're just joking around. So, and there's lots of other tools that we use within the business that's, as well.
Before we get into that, so you're on Facebook, possibly Instagram. Do you use LinkedIn at all, or do you find that
I have a LinkedIn profile? I haven't used it extensively. I think probably because the engagement that I need tends to be less in that space. That's just, construction is often, if you're talking to other people in this industry, they're generally not computer bound, although that's changing, but they generally aren't. I think in terms of a customer base, yes, that would be a place to go, which is why I've got the profile. It's just second round.
No, that's okay, because I think one of the things we do and try to impress upon our users here, because we've heard it so many times from experts, is like, you don't have to be on every channel, because really every channel doesn't suit every business. And it's really important to know where your customers are and where you want to be. And it can be really overwhelming to try and run multiple channels all at the same time and have slightly different content based on what is popular on that channel. And it's better to do something really well on a channel than to try and do a mediocre job on lots and lots of channels.
I think that was a very strong driver for us in this journey, that I kind of refused to have a business Facebook and Instagram profile until I had professional photography to put onto it. I just didn't want to have that done in an amateur way. I need everything to look like we built.
Yeah,
So
and I guess that is a part of your brand, you know.
It is. So that's why I didn't do that until I was really sure I had all my nuts and bolts in the right places.
Especially platforms like Instagram on the post side. So when you've got your posts, you know, that's like when we actually had the pleasure of having Facebook come on, they weren't Meta at that point. I think they were still Facebook. They came on and talked about Facebook and Instagram. And the lady said something that really resonated with me. And she said, you know, on Instagram, your posts are your catalog. That's your catalog. That's it, you know, but your stories are your reality TV. So you don't need to polish your stories, but as far as your posts, you do need to, you know, you do want to have an aesthetic there, especially because yours is such a heritage, kind of classy, high-end kind of thing. You want to look high-end when people come to your page. If it was a mess, people are like, oh, I'm not sure I want them to work on my project, you know.
And clear in your identity, so that when I look at my Instagram posts, all of the posts look similar. They're not the same, but they have the same feel. So that all that photographs were taken by the same photographer, and it's got the same similar lighting, and the colors are sort of similar, so that you can kind of feel that brand all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you use Canva to put together a lot of those posts?
Yeah.
We have, so we're big fans of Canva. We're also fans of Design Space, which is a Kiwi-owned Canva. So I would encourage folks to go and check it out. It's DZYN and then an actual space and then the word space. John Boyle designed this company. He worked in printing and kind of everything was going digital. And after a few decades in printing, he was like, right, well, Canva's not a Kiwi-owned business. We're going to have our own Kiwi Canva. And so it's owned by Kiwis for Kiwis. And he actually hires and pays for a lot of Kiwis to take imagery, and like you can find actual New Zealand imagery on there, which you often can't find on Canva, you know.
I have struggled with that, so I will go and
check it out. Check it out. We'll prop up another small business because he's a small business as well. We love to promote small business here at Digital Boost. What's Dean had to say? Did you know Canva have a development office in Auckland? No, I didn't know that, Dean. Oh, that'd be cool. Maybe we can get them on now because they're really hard to get a hold of. Thanks, Dean. So let's move on. So you've got your social media. Now you work in construction. What tools are specific to your industry that are digital that you absolutely love?
So we looked around for some project management software for actually quite a long time. There were a few on the table. BuildExact was one. Tradeify is another. There's another one called, I think it's Fergus, that a lot of the plumbers and electricians use, and nothing felt quite right. And then I came across Next Minute, and that is quite intuitive. As I said, some of our staff, the massive upside is that they have this wealth of experience. They can problem solve like no one else, but they don't love technology. So you've got to be a bit careful about how you introduce that, especially if it's something's going to be, you've got to, as opposed to I'd like you to. And so I came across Next Minute, and I could easily work it myself. And I thought this might suit us. So that's where one of the things that we picked up quite a while ago now, and probably about more than 12 months, maybe 18 months ago. And what we found was that at a low level, it sort of just basically did timesheets. So all my timesheets became electronic and in real time, which was awesome. That made a really big difference to me. But what we found is that we've been able to layer up over time, so that we're now using our notes functions. So when our operations manager came on board, he can write notes daily to show what's happened on that job. So if he's off sick or he's not around, I can actually hop on if someone rings me and say, oh, let me just see where that's up to. Did that get ordered? When was it? How far away is it? Has anyone chased it up? Especially with materials, which is a big deal at the moment, just trying to, steel, for example, for, mesh for foundations. It was due one Monday, and literally they rang on the Monday and said, hey, we've had COVID through our factory, where I couldn't actually tell you when it's coming, and I thought it was coming that day. So that's how tight those timeframes can change quite quickly.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that. That's nice that you found a platform that worked. We, if anybody wants to check out Next Minute, we did an interview with them. You can check out that. Just type in Next Minute in the Digital Boost platform, and it'll pull up the session that we ran with them. I think we ran just one. And if you're interested looking at the others, because maybe some of the others will work for you, Tradeify and Fergus. I've had Dan Pollard on a few times, who started Fergus. There's some sessions on there about those platforms as well. Do check them out, because it will make your life easier. But you're absolutely right. It's all about how you introduce these platforms to your team, because a lot of times the tech is actually, the getting people used to using the tech is the hardest part of the actual application. And there's actually a question here from Lydia. They said, what software system do you use to manage your subcontractors' bills and match them to your payment claims?
Xero.
Yeah.
Xero.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Xero actually has been with us a really long time. We'd done work for Rod Drury and when Xero was first in its infancy, and knew him a little bit anyway. And I actually went to a presentation that he did way back in, I think 2010 at the BNZ Partners here in Hastings. And I begged and begged. At that point, we were using, my accountant had got me using MYOB, but it wasn't even online. It wasn't even on cloud-based. It was just, I really couldn't. I'm not an accountant. I'm a physiotherapist originally. So I had I just found it so difficult. And so I picked up, when I found out about Xero, I was like, this is so much easier. Well, very quickly, we introduced that, and I used that for everything. I use it for not just for managing subcontractors' bills and invoices and batch paymenting and all of that kind of thing, but I also use it for understanding how my business is doing. So I'll use all the profit and loss, and we'll delve into that quite deeply. I have every 90 days I catch up with my financial account. He is my accountant, but also helps me develop the business, and we'll look at those numbers quite closely, and I look at them weekly or monthly with Lauren. So that's my office manager. So I sort of use that every day, all the time.
Yeah, Xero has so many features. It's really cool, and it integrates with so many other platforms as well. Yep. I don't know if you use it for your inventory at all, but you can integrate it with some other platforms. I think possibly some of those would be maybe Unleashed and Sin 7, if I'm correct. Don't quote me on it, but yeah, if you're a person who has inventory and that is a part of your accounting that you need to think about, have a look. Just type in inventory integrations or something like that in the Xero platform, and actually pull up all the tools that you can plug in as well, because it's great to have transparency about that, because you can also, because that comes into the play of your cash flow and how much product you can buy and to develop your business. Look, how wonderful is it to have everything in real time on your phone, even with Xero. It's so easy to use. We've done so many sessions with them. Do check it out. One of the things that I do love about Xero, and I always talk about it, is that they really actually care about small business and small businesses' mental health. So if you have a Xero account, you actually have access to mental health services as well, and your whole family has access to it. So it's like they really do wrap around their clientele, and you can actually call them. You can do things like that. You can get great customer service there. So I'm so glad that you switched from a shoebox basically to Xero, because I'm sure it makes your life so much easier.
I can very, very vividly remember the first time when it came up with your reconciling page, and you just go, okay. And that was it. I was like, that. Yeah, that. I was like dancing around the room.
You're like, yes. So there's a second question here. It says, do you link in materials purchased, etc., to your payment claims and quotes? It can be quite time consuming, but I feel it's beneficial to do so we track the more detailed profit and loss. Do you feel the same?
Yes. So what we do a couple of things. What we tend to do is for every big build, I run a spreadsheet, and I've come unstuck a little bit at times with clients saying, I don't mind sharing the spreadsheet with them, that's fine, but only if they say, can you do it this way or that way? Then I sort of say, no, it needs to stay so that we can understand it. It's ultimately our spreadsheet, which says what's happening on this job. But it's not, it's transparent. It's not that I'm hiding anything. It's just that I'm not going to try and do things that confuse us. So basically what happens is when I'm quoting, I'll set up, like I was doing it yesterday, I had the contract open with the client, I had the quote that I'd done, and then I had the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet and the quote talk exactly. So you can see, so it'll say materials budget 200,000, for example. And then that's broken down in the quote as to what I think each thing will be. But it's obviously an estimate because of the way materials are. But what we can do to track it is then in my spreadsheet, when I invoice, it'll say, I've invoiced this much, and this is what I had to start with. Now the balance is that for materials, as opposed to, and then I might have boxed up other things like maybe the ribra floor or the foundations will have a number by them. And then when we've invoiced the entirety of that out as it's costed, then you know if you've come in under or over.
Yeah. And do you use Excel or do you use Google as a
Excel?
As a team? Yeah.
Excel for that. And then we use Google Sheets for equipment. One of the things that is important to us is having the right gear in the right place, because that's efficient. So, but we might have 4 builds going at one time, and it's not efficient to have 4 compactors. So I might have 2 compactors and I need to know where they are at any one time. So we use Google Sheets for that. So you can just have a list of everything that we think as a communal, the big pieces of equipment, things like a cement mixer or a laser level where I haven't got heaps of them, and then I will put that on a Google Sheet, and then people can update that.
Why do you use Google Sheets for that, but not Excel? If you're on Excel anyway, I'm just wondering.
I don't know. I think I've just done it that way. I think. Yeah.
I'm just interested.
I think it was because I knew that it was where people could come in and use it. Everyone could see.
Oh, okay. So your Excel, maybe everyone doesn't have a license for your Microsoft. That's probably why.
And they won't necessarily do that. Like they've just got a smartphone, they can open Sheets on a smartphone. Yeah. And so it just works differently that way.
Yeah, because Microsoft, I mean, like if somebody is a Gmail, they've got access to, the Google kind of workspace. But and a lot of our Microsoft, you often need to have licenses, and there are I mean, you can put it on the cloud, you can access it from anywhere. But I would say, maybe that, is switching
that was kind
people
of why
from,
we did. And also a lot of my staff, they've all got their own smartphones, which we provided, and we bought Samsung up the A12s or whatever they are. They're the kind of decent basic, and they run like they're quite Google orientated. They have Google Play, and so those things were easier for them to navigate.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I was just wondering, we're actually going to do next Thursday, for those of you guys that are our Excel people, I'm just going to do a little plug here. We're doing our first workshop next Thursday from 10 to 12 with a Microsoft certified partner trainer, and we're going to do Excel. So if you want to learn some tips and tricks, because it's all about time-saving features and using them, so you do need to register for that event. Go to Digital Boost, or there should be some links coming out on some social media posts. Register up for that. We'll be able to see your face. You'll be able to turn your mic on. It's like a total interactive workshop so that you can get upskilled in Excel, because I think one of the cool things is Excel is epically efficient. so many features, but if you don't know the features, you're like, oh God, copy paste, but there's so many shortcuts. But if you don't know like shortcuts and all of those time-saving things, you can really spend quite a lot of time in there, especially if you're using it for numbers. If you're not using the formatting the cells and putting summations, you change one number and then you've got to change all the other numbers if they're not all like formatted. So we're going to get into some stuff next week, so do join us for that. Yeah, Emily, that's really interesting, because I think that having your team, picking tools that work for your team is really important. And it just sounds like you really take that into consideration in your business. So are there any tools that you just can't live without, that you just find are epically useful for you? Digital tools, obviously, not construction tools. You can tell us that too if you want. But
no, I really would say the two that I couldn't live without are Next Minute and Xero. They talk to each other. They basically, between those two platforms, I could do other things without any of the other stuff, but I couldn't run it without those two. The collaboration between those two things allows me to have visibility. It allows me to problem solve. It allows me to even communicate well with. So if a client rings and says, I don't know, how come this number of hours, it took this long to do this piece of work, then I can actually jump into Next Minute and say when the builders put their hours in, they write notes. So if it says straightening, opening for French doors, and it took them 6 hours, I'm confident enough that they weren't mucking around. That my foremen have worked for me for a million years. There will be a reason why that was so difficult to do. Yes, so, and if you probably go and talk to them, they'll tell you. So it's really good that I can explain stuff, even communicate because of that. I've got the information.
Fantastic. I love that. Another question here, it says, do you have software that you'd recommend for your quantity surveying? I'm looking at Build Exact or ITWO and trying to decide which will best sync with other software for tracking costs.
I think the two platforms that we use, there is more capacity within those, as I think you mentioned with with Xero you can manage stock, and with Next Minute I can manage what's happening. So from that point of view, I think that the software's there to do it, and it's how much you want to make use of that. Really, there's good like time project management features within Next Minute that allow you to say, well, we're going to get to this point by then, and then you can use that to manage your stock levels in Xero. But what we've tended to do with stock, I just only touched on it lightly before. So one of the things that happens at the moment is we're needing to buy materials way ahead of where we would normally have had to. So I've bought jib board for orders, and they're not even dug out yet. They're not even, we're not at lining out. We haven't got a pre-line, we're miles away, but you've got to find somewhere to hold that stock. So one of the things that we do is that's where that spreadsheet comes in, where I say, okay, we've bought $8,000 worth of jib. That now comes off your material costs. And now that's, and then we'll get that to them, and then it becomes theirs, as long as we've got somewhere to store it. So that's how you sort of manage the quantities.
Yeah, that's great. I hope that was useful, Lydia. If you need more assistance with that, do talk to our support team at support@digitalboost.co.nz, and we'll kind of we can maybe help out some more if you're still unsure. I think that was really helpful, so maybe that's answered your question. But I do recommend to anybody that is watching this that if you're really lost in a sea of apps, which is definitely happens,
the other
just
thing
reach out. We'll help you kind of sort through.
We keep quite good, strong, real-time connection with some of our suppliers. So we actually have set up a weekly meeting with Carter's to go through our pre-cut list, through our frames and trusses time frames, and then we can coordinate that way as well. So we're allowing them to sort of manage some of that. So they'll have QS'd at the beginning. So yeah.
Awesome. Look, this has been such a great session. I want to give, before we close out, I just want to give everybody an opportunity to ask any other questions they might have. I also want to just dart over to the other platforms. I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to be looking weirdly at the screen because I'm actually looking at the other platforms, just making sure we've got all of our questions answered. So many great questions today. Thank you so much. And lots of good insights on tools to use in the construction kind of industry. There are so many tools out there, and I think that construction is really starting to come on board with digital, just because it is necessary, but it's also helping to streamline processes and save time, which is, saving money, and everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So one more question here. It says, what software do you use to manage your pre-cut list with your building team and carters?
Yeah, we don't, other than we just do that in real. So our rep turns up and we talk to him, and we allow them to we just stay in communication, really. So there is going to be, I believe, carters are developing like a portal where you can go on, but I think it's still quite clunky in its infancy, and we're still finding that's working quite well for us. But I think that's probably a reflection of who we are, in that we've got these strong links. Our rep, in fact, our operations manager had worked for carters in a slightly different area, so he knows, he's got good relationships there. And our rep has been, almost a part of our team for years and years. So I think that we've kept that because it suits us. But that's not to say that there aren't tools and applications out there that will work. The only other thing that we're just starting to touch into is some more data on. So we're just about to put into the joinery shop a piece of software that tells us about things like air quality and temperature, and there's a platform that talks to that, so that I can, and noise. So that's like a lot of health and safety. We've also got Site Connect for health and safety management. So there's more that we do sort of in that health and safety space as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because those kind of sensors, I believe, like, all of that, it's kind of IoT, Internet of Things, working towards a lot of IoT or Internet of Things are being used more and more in construction and building to make sure that spaces are fit for purpose. I actually had the opportunity to do a podcast with a gentleman that's developed a system, and it reads the whole building. It figures out, I think even before it's almost built, I don't know how it does it, but it knows the temperatures that'll be in each room. It'll tell you, it looks at the lighting that happens. And so that way, when they design where the windows are and where the air conditioning units are and the heating systems, everything comes into play for sustainability. This was IoT for sustainability. Yeah. There's some really interesting tools out there.
The IoT for joinery will be, really, really important in terms of health, because, for example, for ears, if there's no ripsaw on, because he's not around that afternoon, and there's really just some people just screwing some stuff in, you maybe don't need your ears on all day. But if your noise levels are up here, then they need to be on regardless, those kinds of things. And same with masks, depending on the dust in the air, depends what you're doing as to what the air quality is like. And temperature with things like when we're painting, especially when we're primering things before they go out, if it's very cold, then things aren't going to dry as quickly. So that then tells me I'm going to need an extra day before it can go out to be fitted.
Smart. Very smart. Making technology work for you instead of the other way around.
Yeah. And I think that was because of my workforce. That was a really big driver for us. I needed to make sure that in the construction industry, I didn't add things that they didn't see benefit of. It had to make sense, and it had to be useful to them. Otherwise, they weren't going to do it.
So another question here, it says, do you get your builders to email or use Google Sheets to load up pre-cut lists, or is this something that you do yourself?
We do it ourselves. Each job has a foreman, and that's part of the operations manager's job, is to bring all of that together. So each foreman will tell me what he's going to need, probably with 2 or 3 days. The big stuff we will order ahead, and I'll organize getting that to site. And that all I need is the nod that they can put it somewhere. Otherwise, they generally talk to our ops guy on a daily basis, and then he'll organise to get those materials out. They could email. We also have a WhatsApp group, so sometimes someone will stick it out on the WhatsApp. That they'll just use that because they know that myself and Jason and Ryan and Lauren can all see it. So that's another thing that can be used when you want to tell everybody. But yeah, that's generally the way that we do it.
I think
you want to be able to have some control of those materials, that otherwise if you don't get the right thing to the right place, the hassle factor of that is really big. So having a one port of call means that someone's the ringmaster helps us.
Yeah. Okay. And you have to figure out what works for your team, like for you and your systems. And, and I think that, trial and error is always a part of iteration, or what have you, is always a part of any system. Just want to make sure we've answered that. So they use Hazard. So we use Hazard Co's Project Plus to manage our subcontractors reporting for health and safety on site, but it's hard to get them to use apps, etc. Do you have any tips to help them transition and get them using these online tools? Great question.
We've struggled with that as well. What we do is, what we found works best is making it someone's job. So for us, it starts with it's my job, because it's my job to make sure that our health and safety processes and policies are followed. So my job is to make sure that Ryan, who's our operations manager, knows that he needs to communicate with our foreman to make sure that's happening. But ultimately, it's our foreman's job. So he's running the site. So I try and load that responsibility onto him to say, this is your site. You're in charge of this site. If you're not here, you have to have put someone else in charge of your site. So if you've gone to get something, then and one of the things that's useful about that is for our middle tier builders, what that does is it says that you learn to step up, and even if it's just for an afternoon, now you're in charge of this site. So things like that, just making it one person's job to make sure that happens, and so that they do that training almost one-to-one, so that each time a new subcontractor comes onto site, they are used to saying, hey, have you got the app? Did you make sure that you signed in on the app? And then you do it that way. That's what we've done. But
I think there's a lot of touching, you just got to build in that communication with the team and making sure that, there's accountability and forming habits, I think it's always really important.
And if there's things that they find difficult, it's figuring out what it is that makes it difficult, not trying to say, oh, it's your fault, oh, it's your fault. It's actually saying, what was it that made that difficult? When they came onto site, did they not say hello? Well, that's something we can easily work on. If that we just say to all of our subcontractors via email, hey, can you just make sure that you check in with the foreman on site every time you go, and just keep saying it until they comfortably do it. It's not a hard thing to say, can you just make sure that someone knows you're there? Well, if he's seen you, that's that done.
Excellent.
So
that sounds really, that's a really great little system there. Dean's also comment, he's been working with Hazard Co too, to make this work. Also Construct Safe, which is a new beast in health and safety. Dean is very much into health and safety on sites and stuff like that. So that would be another tool. I know that I have spoken to a number of people who work in your sector, and they always say it is about just that continual repetition to build the habits with their workers to use the tech. And also exactly what you said, which is figuring out why they're not doing it. Because if you can troubleshoot that, then that overcomes that obstacle. I know that I don't know if it was Dan who said this to me, but he said that a lady on his team used to text message, because they were better at answering text than other things, used to text message all of the guys on the team about their out, on a certain day.
And that's, we use that too. We text message ours because they're better at answering texts. They don't always even pick it up if you phone them because they've got their ears on, but they'll often look at it, and because it's there on their screen, they'll see the text first. So when we've got a staff meeting, for example, we'll text.
And I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what's working for your team, and it's a way that you can condition folks, hopefully eventually they get there. And Dean's just further comment saying it's also about using software to your needs, not the wants. And that's exactly right. I think everybody should reevaluate every few months, maybe every 6 months or every quarter. What subscriptions do I have? What tools are we using? Are they working for us? What are some new tools that are out there? Would they work better for us? Because tech is constantly evolving. So there's no need to stick with something that isn't working with you.
That's right. And I think it's possibly worth sometimes going back to the people that do the tech. If somebody's brought something out, so for example, one of the things that I'm not sure if next minute, I haven't sort of investigated this particularly, but it's on my list, is looking at how much customers can see. So if clients can come in and say, for example, they had access to the notes function, they wouldn't need to ask me. They could just look at that themselves. But how much do they? Obviously, they don't need to see other people's jobs. So it's just figuring that one out. And I know that there are other platforms that do that. But I'm wondering whether it's better to sometimes go back to what you're using and say to the people that make it, the help desk or whatever, hey, can I do this? Because maybe you just don't know how to do it. Or if they don't have that functionality, maybe then they'll build it, because that saves you learning a whole new system.
People, software companies want to have their tool be a one-stop shop for you. So if you recommend, say, hey, why don't you integrate with this? Can you integrate with this? Or we really need this? Oftentimes they will go and build it for you. I mean, it's like that is their whole purpose, is to make you happy, basically, so you stay with them. So do give them feedback. That's great advice, Emily. Honestly, so good. And just reevaluating those tools, such a great insight there. We have taken up so much of your time. I just want to thank you so much for coming on today, because we've got so much great value out of this session. And I hope everybody's really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to following Brittin's Builders journey online. And, I love heritage kind of and all of that kind of renovation. I love all of that kind of stuff. I just think it's so beautiful, and it's wonderful to actually restore and keep things that do have, history. And so, thanks so much. And just a comment here, fabulous session. Thank you so much. You are very welcome, Lydia. I love having folks on like Emily who can share their journey and tell us how they're doing things, so that we can learn from people who already know what's going on. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I will see you next week. Do check out the schedule. Our schedule has changed dramatically from what we've been doing over the past year. So stay tuned, up to date with the newsletter, or there's always a pinned post at the top of our social media channels, so that you know what's happening. We've got a workshop next week. Sign up. You have to register to get in. And thanks again, Emily. Good.
Thanks very much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Have a wonderful day, everyone. We'll see you next week.